This drill is the two major ways to square the club face. So there are lots of different ways that you can classify the swing, and one of the ways that I like to classify it is if you tend to be more of an upper body dominant swing or you tend to be more of a lower body dominant swing. When you start getting into different preferences and biases, you'll tend to see that the lower body dominant swing tends to do better with the longer clubs like the driver 3-wood long irons, and you'll tend to see that the upper body dominant swing tends to do with the shorter clubs, kind of 8-iron through wedges. Now, they have slightly different kind of ways of controlling low point and things that work around them, but you'll see that the best golfers in the world are able to kind of oscillate between one versus the other, just as a really good tennis player is able to hit a really powerful ground stroke and then hit a volley when they need to. So when we look at these two different swing patterns, we'll see that there's different ways of squaring the club face as the dominant movement. If you tend to be more upper body dominant, you will tend to get steep with the shaft. So it will tend to require less body rotation, and it will tend to require a little bit of kind of standing up and or lunging to help control the low point. With this kind of little bit steeper arm movement, kind of like so, if you were to then motorcycle, you will tend to have really diggy contact and take really steep divots. So the way that you'll tend to see the more common approach if you tend to be more upper body dominant is to square the face more with the supination, kind of like this. So you've seen a lot of golf books and golf instructors talk about this style of release. It just doesn't match up with what the best drivers of the golf ball do or what the most consistent ball strikers do when they're hitting the longer clubs. They may feel that, but 3D has kind of revealed that that's not necessarily the case. So if you're going to get more upper body dominant, then feeling a little bit more of the tumble or feeling a little bit more of the club working through this supination kind of like this can work really well for hitting the ball solidly, given a couple different things. One, making sure that I'm not really firing my lower body or getting too open. Number two, making sure that my arm's pretty straight at impact, so I'm not going to have a ton of rotation and side bend. That's all fine and good for the shorter shots where it's okay to have a little bit steeper angle of attack, but it's going to give me lots of problems when I get into the longer clubs. So with the longer clubs, one of the hallmarks of the body-centered swing is you're going to have a little bit more of this arm shallowing. So instead of the arms working kind of steeply, you're going to tend to have more of this arm shallowing movement. With this arm shallowing movement, it's going to be very difficult for me to continue rotating and supinate hard enough, early enough in order to square the club face. So I tend to need more of this shaft rotation, and I tend to need more of this motorcycle movement. So when I start getting into shallow and powering it more with the body, I'm going to have this motorcycle movement, and then it will kind of gradually blend into that supination down late. But a lot of golfers describe it, and 3D will tend to show that that motorcycle movement and the shaft rotation tends to be a little bit more dominant when you're using more of the body-centered approach. If you're struggling with controlling the club face or getting the ball, controlling the face-to-path relationship, you should look at these two methods for squaring the club face. Even with the arm dominant swing, if you're going to have some body power, you're going to have some motorcycle. It's just not going to be quite as much as if you were doing more of the body-driven, the Adam Scotts, Justin Rose, Rory McIlroy, Dustin Johnson, all those really elite ball strikers. So you can play around drill-wise with working between the two. So you can see, okay, if I was to go more in this pattern, what would happen if I got really aggressive with my body? I would tend to hit kind of more of a snap hook. So that's not going to work. I need to have a little bit more shallow arms, which is kind of the opposite, and having a little bit more of that motorcycle so that I can hit a little bit more of that push draw. So then I can play around with the opposite. I can get a little bit more vertical and work with the arms kind of like so. And so there's my kind of arm dominant swing, really pulling with my arms, and now I'm going to feel a little bit more of that tumble, or I'm going to feel more of that supination. And in order to balance that, I'm going to just let my upper body kind of drift a little bit more on top of the golf ball instead of having that really good bracing, that really good pivot. Because what I would feel is if I got a little bit steeper and arm dominant and I motorcycled, you can hear, well, A, I think I shanked that a little bit, but B, you can hear, and I could totally feel the club just wanting to dig into the ground. So part of the beauty of the motorcycle is it tends to help you want to shallow out to avoid hitting the ground, which gets you more body-centered, body-driven, which helps with the longer clubs. But there is a time and a place for having more of this arm tumble method of squaring the club face. So if you're confused with how to control the club face, hopefully this drill helps you understand the two major forms, either rotating the shaft or using the entire shaft to move the path. Those two methods will help close the club face, and you have to make sure that you're not applying the wrong one, or else it's definitely going to cause you contact and ball flight issues with one end of the spectrum, either the short clubs or the long clubs.